These are questions begging for answers, and we have a panel here in the studio and to discuss the retreat for ministers and presidential aides. Let me first introduce in the studio here Otigwe Ubuzo, founding executive director, African Center for Leadership Strategy and Development. You're welcome to Good Morning.
Thank you very much.
He's a regular here. It's been a while.
Yeah.
And also joining us via Zoom is the Minister of State Health and Social Welfare, Dr. Junji Alausa. A pleasure to have you join us. Okay. Yeah. Okay, he's there. And also joining us here in the studio is Dr. Kabir Adamu, another regular. He's a security and risk management expert. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Yes, we don't know if the Zoom network is really clear now that we can begin with the minister, so that we can go through some of the issues here. If you can hear me, Honorable Minister, you're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria once again. This retreat has been happening. Previous administrations have had retreats like this for ministers and aides, but this one has a distinct difference, and it has a feel of positivity. And we've just had the president saying, in the speech, that if you're not with us, you go away. That means if you cannot perform, you'll be sacked. What was the focus of this retreat, and how did this resonate with the government officials there, including you?
How are you? And thanks for inviting me over this early morning. Anybody that knows a President Bola, Ahmed, Tinubu, will know all his qualities, at least a significant number of his qualities. He is very determined, and he's always very focused on what he wants to do. He's done this since he's been in public life. We can all see what he did as governor of Lagos State for the entire 8 years, and we see how Lagos State is performing now. So when the president came and decided to put indicators, key performance indicators for ministers and other government officials on what he would like them to accomplish as part of his government. I know there's been previous times where the president put these indicators, talked about indicators like this, but it wasn't really implemented. The president was very deliberate and very calculative on what he wanted to do this time around. So this presidential retreat was well organized, well coordinated. There's a CDU, Central Delivery Unit, at the presidency now, that is headed by a special advisor to the president on policy and coordination. So the retreat had various components in it. Lots of senior government officials came and spoke to the ministers and permanent secretaries and several other presidential aides on what they should expect from this government and also on the workings and functioning of the government. We had the head of Secretary to Government, Senator George Akume spoke, the head of service spoke, the Accountant General spoke, and other distinguished speakers. They all expanded our knowledge on the workings of the government. And we had several panels, expert panels, that discussed several 8 priorities of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And at the end of the whole, the key performance indicators, which I term our own scorecard, were all designed by the ministers on how they would like to be scored. In my ministry, at the Ministry of Health, we designed our own scorecard, the KPIs. And what the president told us was that, listen, these are the things you've decided that you will be able to accomplish in the first, second, and third year. Put it down, and they will, every 6 months and every year, they will evaluate the indicators is put together and see if you are meeting those indicators. And I will tell you, the president is very determined that This is just not the old times where anybody, any minister or a government official can just do what they wanted. You had to work based on the 8 priorities of the government, and you'll be scored based on what you said you will do as a ministry and as ministers coordinating those ministries.
Many thanks, Dr. Tunji Alausa. Very interesting to know that the retreat was well organized and coordinated, like you mentioned. But I just want to find out from you. You said the ministers will be scored based on, what they said they would deliver or what they will bring on the table as ministers and all of that. So I want to find out, some ministers are already up and running, and some ministers didn't know that there'll be a warning like this coming from the president, either you perform or you resign, and some already set a blueprint because you were inaugurated in August, some months before now. So could you tell us, how do you think this would, affect the performance? And we hear that there was a performance bond, signed by the officials. Do you really think that this would get the ministers up on their toes and get them do the right thing? Or you think it will be business as usual? Just let us know. What really do you think, how was the message taken by the ministers? You're a minister, so tell me, was it just taken like, oh, what they usually say, or we're going to do this time around?
Thank you for that excellent question. It's not business as usual, and I'll let you know. I'll tell you. This was not the first time. This was then the first time we heard about this. All ministers knew about this before. There had been several correspondences between the presidencies, between the presidency and the ministries. We all knew about it coming to this retreat. The retreat was just the epitome of what the president had set out to do, to let us know. It was more or less a formal inauguration or formal elucidation of what the way the government, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, wants the government to function. We all knew about this retreat. We had been working diligently, ministers, PAMSECs, we had all been working diligently in the last, since we were inaugurated, about this retreat. The special advisor to the president on policy and coordination, Mrs. Hadiza Bala Usman, had been in contact communication with us about all these deliverables. And the president, during his campaign, and he said it clearly, is determined to fix our country, is determined to give the citizens of Nigeria the dividends of democracy, and is determined to create and eliminate poverty in our society. Is determined to fight corruption. And let me just talk about all the 8 priorities of the president. First one was poverty eradication, food security, and access to capital, business growth and job creation, and more so inclusivity, where we can see several of this is already working. The government, this presidency, this cabinet has the highest number of women in this cabinet. We have the highest number of youth. We now have ministers just above 32 years. And the 6th priority is anti-corruption. The president is very determined to fight corruption in our society. Also, rule of law and national security. We've seen it in terms of security. We might not be where we have, but everybody will agree today our country is better secured. There are less violence and less attack. Boko Haram is beginning to be a thing of the past in the country. So we all knew about this. We've had handbooks, we have booklets, we had education materials that has been sent to us as ministers to read, and we've discussed some of these actually at our first Federal Executive Council meeting as well. So this is not new to us. It was just the epitome, the retreat was just the epitome of what the president wanted us to do. And President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is very determined. This is different. We're in a different era. It's not that minister will just resign. Because these KPIs, these scorecards were designed by us. And that's why this is like homegrown homegrown monitoring system. It wasn't the presidency that just said, oh, Ministry of Health, where I work as a minister, that, oh, these are the things you need to do. It gave us time, the president gave us time, you assessed what you met on the ground, you've done your diagnostic. Now, see what you want to do of all these myriad of problems that you've seen in your ministry. Design for yourself how you want to get this accomplished. Give yourself a timeline on when this will be accomplished. And it's year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. So to succinctly answer your question, this was just not something thrown at us at the retreat. We were all aware all along from the day we were inaugurated as ministers.
Okay, I'm still going to stay with you before we come back to the studio. You know, assessing the performance of ministers is key to taking Nigeria out of the quagmire we find ourselves. It's a global thing, actually, and with the removal of oil subsidy, Nigerians are expectant. There's so much expectations on this government, and the president is eager to deliver. But first, there must be a total alignment, you know, with the president and the minister, you know, to be able to succeed coming at this time. Now, I want to ask you this question in specific. Are all the ministers on board this ship that the president always talks about, this ship that he has with the 8-point priority agenda for his administration and the campaign promises he made? Are all the ministers on board this ship and ready to steer the ship of progress for this country?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Let me answer you unequivocally. All ministers are on board. We're all on board. The energy, the passion. And I spoke to you earlier on about the panel. There were about 8 panels during the retreat. These were all anchored. These were all not anchored. The panelists were mostly ministers. So we're all, and you could see the energy, the determination, the focus of how each and every minister contributed to this panel discussion. And like what the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will say, we're all in the same house. We're all just sleeping in different rooms. And he said, the other thing he will say is that we're all on the same ship. He just happened to be the sailor of the ship, the captain of the ship. We're all there together. But the ministers are all on board with delivering the dividends of democracy to the citizen, working for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, working for the nation. So there's no question about that. The energy, and I've never seen, I'm privileged to be part of this cabinet, but I've seen ministers in previous governments. But the synchrony, the determination, the urge to work to get us out of these problems we're in is just beyond my own imagination. I talk to my colleague about things, they jump on it immediately. We're all talking together. And if you know the president is the motivator. Beyond being a grand commander of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and the commander-in-chief, is the motivator-in-chief. The way it was very granular, practical at the retreat, even when we hold the Federal Executive Council meetings. Previously, what we would discuss in 3 hours, I'm sure the previous government, you spent 8 hours discussing things. The question was, does it make sense? Would it impact positively on the citizens of Nigeria? Would people be happy about it? If those benchmarks are met, what do you think as ministers? I'm the chairman of the council. Let's move on. Should we approve or not approve? It carries everyone along. It carries everyone along. The way discussions are being had at the top level of government, very granular, very simple, very practical. And at this retreat particularly, the president said, the way if he closed the retreat was just so emotional. Very that, now, let's do this together. Are you with me? Let's do this together. And he was very meticulous and very careful in selecting all his ministers and special advisors and all his presidential aides that are currently working with him in the government. So we have a president that is motivator-in-chief, and we're all aligned behind him to help this president succeed, to get the best to our country.
So much, Dr. Alausa. Good to know that we have a motivator in chief, and we just hope that, like you have said, all the ministers are on board. Well, the message is clear and direct. If you're not on board, you get kicked out.
Yes.
I'd like to come to you, Dr. Adamu. You're a security and risk management expert. You were also part of the retreat. You felt the message. You passed some messages, as a resource person yourself. So I'd like you to tell us, what really makes this particular retreat different from the ones we've been having? And then the fact that you're not an aide, you're not a minister, were you able to read the body language of the ministers? Do you really think they will deliver?
Thank you very much. So the entire activity is centered around performance management delivery system, which is an internationally recognized process of monitoring performance. If I'm right, it started from the UK and then it was embraced here in Nigeria, specifically under Executive Order 13. And that means as a country now, we have institutionalized performance management as part of our governance process. Just like the minister mentioned, what happened from Wednesday last week to Friday is a culmination of a process that has started over a long period. My participation involved several processes. There is a central delivery coordination unit that is domiciled in the office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, which is a crop of young, very vibrant, cerebral, I would say civil servants, technocrats, who are at the center of this performance delivery management system. Of course, the SA to the President on policy and coordination is spearheading the entire process. So what did I see there? I saw energy. There was a statement by the President at the opening session where he described where the entire members of the retreat, and by the way, PAMSEX too were there. They were a critical part of the retreat. So in other words, the political heads as well as the civil servants were together. It wasn't just politicians, appointees. The civil service too was part of that process. So he told them to consider themselves in a tunnel, and that the direction that tunnel is leading them to is where they should be headed. Anyone who is thinking otherwise is not part of the team. So he was that clear. That was the kind of energy I saw in the entire 3 days of the process. Questions were asked in a very frank manner. There were issues that, this is a public forum, so I can't bring them up, but contentious issues that were discussed there, and they were ironed out in the spirit of harmony, where you could see both, especially, like I said, the technocrats, the civil servants, and then the political heads. There are differences that perhaps, if they had not been brought to the fore in such a retreat, would have affected the performance of those ministers. But they were brought up in a very convivial manner, and they were addressed in a manner that left, I think, everybody satisfied. You could hear both sides clapping at the end of the day. Another issue that also came to the fore is the constitutional role of both the honorable ministers, as it were, and the ministers of state. That too was discussed almost harmoniously. And so I think, looking back, and especially considering the energy that the retreat started with and the energy it ended with, I would say it was a success. More importantly, at the end of it, a number of recommendations were reeled out by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, and critical recommendations that, apart from the delivery, the performance monitoring system, would also help the government in terms of meeting its objectives. Those 8 priority areas, every Nigerian, irrespective of who you are, where you are, you can relate to them. So meeting the objectives of those priority areas is actually ours. It's not for the government. It is us as Nigerians that would be happy if we look back and say, well, this government did 50%, did 75%, did 90%. And I think I would also want to emphasize that, just like the minister mentioned, the KPIs, key performance indicators that have been mentioned, targets have been set, baselines that would tell us where we are at the moment. Baselines are where you are. And then, of course, from 2024, you would set a target up until 2027. So the process would require constant bilateral sessions between the CDCU and the various ministries where these KPIs will now be measured. I'm sure probably Dr. Otibe will speak a little bit about the process, but these are recognized processes of measuring performances, and I'm very delighted and happy that Nigeria has embraced that. In summary, I think the energy was palpable at the retreat, and I'm looking forward to, as Nigerians, we're sometimes a little bit pessimistic when we hear politicians talk, but I started by saying this is an internationally recognized process. So I'm hoping that as we progress, we're going to use that process, because remember, the president also talked about an app that has been developed, and that app will be made available to Nigerians. So it's not just going to be the CDCU, as it were. Nigerians would also have the ability to look into this process and say, are we making progress or not? Some of them are very practical, like my area that I'm very comfortable with.
I see you're so excited. The positivity is evaporating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In security, if we're making progress, we will know. Nobody will tell you. I'll be able to kick my car in the morning and drive to Kaduna without any fear. Of course, if there is insecurity along the road, I won't be able to do that. So most of these 8 priority areas are things that Nigerians can relate with. It's not something that I'll come and sit here on NTA and say there is an improvement. You can actually relate to it. If there is exactly, if there's an improvement in food security, all of us can relate to that. Inclusivity, you know, just like the minister mentioned, the number of women, the number of youths in the cabinet. These are things that we can all relate with. So I'm quite excited, really, and I felt that during the retreat.
All right.
You know, you're rubbing it on us. We're excited
I'm happy
too,
that
as
I was able to do
Nigerians,
that.
actually. And you know, talking about inclusivity, let me bring in Dr. Otive Iguzo back into the conversation. You know, governance is not only concentrated at the center. You know, and to succeed, there must be an alignment with the subnationals to key into, you know, the government's agenda and key areas of the administration. And would you say that this retreat is able to achieve this by coming together in coordination with the states, so that Nigerians, like Kabir Adamu is saying, Nigerians can feel, you know, the positivity, the presence of the center in the state and the subnationals? Most of the time, you know, power trickles down, but people at the subnationals, at the local government level, sometimes they don't care about us. They don't care what we do. They don't care how we live. They don't care. But I have a positive feeling about this, that every Nigerian will feel the import, the impact, the pulse of this government. And we will, after 4 years, after, you know, before another elections comes around, we'll be able to say that this government has delivered. And that is what the president's language has been from inauguration to date.
Yeah, I think that first and foremost, the retreat is a welcome development. And as Kabiru has said, you know, it's an international process of ensuring that countries have key results. That, as a matter of fact, there is a monitoring and evaluation system for the entire country, from which you draw key performance indicators for each sector. From what the minister has said and from what he has said, I think the retreat was a good one, and is well focused to increasing performance and delivery. And the establishment of the Policy Coordination Unit is also a welcome development. But the concrete question you asked about subnational engagement, one of the recommendations from the retreat, which the SGF rolled out, is the need to strengthen subnational engagement with state and local government. But I think that there are other key issues that this government must do in order for this performance to happen. First is that there is the need for adoption of an overarching development strategy. Luckily, the departing Buhari administration had Nigeria Agenda 2050. But the government has been silent about adoption, review, or realignment of that development strategy in line with the president's vision, goals, and 8 key priorities. Secondly, there is the need for a system of filtering policy ideas, for government to adopt and utilize. It is dangerous for any country to rely solely on politicians and political advisors for formulation of its strategy, policies, and ideas that will guide its own administration. Because globally, it's known that the countries in the last 30 years that have made tremendous progress in terms of development are those with long development strategies and sound systems for making policies, whether it's China or India or Botswana or Mauritius. These are countries that have made a lot of progress, or Brazil. Singapore in the last 30 years. Nigeria is probably one of the few countries in the world that the government has no think tank. The governing party has no think tank. The think tank of the opposition party is in comatose. And so, how do you filter policy ideas? That is why at times you see policies that, as ordinary citizens, you are amazed at how government can come to those policies. So, for this performance to work well, and for the aspiration, because the president always says the right things, and with the right focus. But there are things that need to be done to make this work. For instance, the issue of strategic communication. All these things that they've mentioned, the two of them have mentioned today, Nigerians are not aware about what went into and strategic communication is key. Because, like Abiru mentioned clearly, the performance of government cannot be led to government alone. Citizens' engagement and citizens' participation is key. So these KPIs need to be made known to Nigerians. They need to, if you have a overall and overarching development agenda, you will have, in fact, what many countries do is that they have, say, we have 48 key results. So every sector have some key results that they are working towards. So it's from those key results that you draw your key performance indicators. Let's take, for instance, housing. So the Ministry of Housing will not just be going and doing workshop and holding meetings. They do public-private partnership. Whereas at the end of the year, there's no number of houses that are built. That is why these key performance indicators, they are key, they are essential for modern day, but there are other things that the government needs to do. Now, one of the key problems is that of orientation, mindset. So the whole key issues of reorientation have to be top priority. There are other issues that this government needs to prioritize. The whole public sector reform, the whole issue of citizens' participation, the whole issue of revisiting the anti-corruption. The government has to set the tone once more at the top. And from the conduct and actions of the president and senior officials, assure Nigerians that corruption will not be tolerated.
Beautiful, Mr. Ikuzo. I like the way you have put it. And it's beyond the ovation, like Kabir said. It's beyond the excitement in the hall, and you know the feeling that, oh, we're going to do something. There's actually more.
It's walking the talk.
Yes, there's actually more to be done. And then, like the minister said earlier, that they were the ones who set the KPI. From what you have said, it looks like there's a fault with that. Then setting, you know, what your KPI should be and what they intend to achieve, you know, at certain timelines. Now, you know, to begin, we're talking about performance. Do you really think, from your own assessment of, you know, those who are manning the different ministries, do you think we have the right pegs and the right holes looking at, because I don't know, if you don't have something, you can't give it. It's not about saying, oh, I'm going to perform. If you do not have the capacity for that office you have been given, of course, performance will be far from you. So do you really think, looking at the composition?
It's always a mixed bag. But from the past 5 months, we have seen some spectacular performances. For instance, from the Internal Affairs Ministry. You know, the issuance of passport. I think that's what Kabiru said. The performance is not theoretical.
It's felt.
It's felt.
Yes.
You can see, in fact, one of my colleagues said he got passport within 24 hours. In the last 4 years,
more than 4 years,
there were people who could not travel because for 3 months, 6 months, they could not renew their passports. So we can see that performance has started taking place. And if you look at the Ministry of Aviation by my brother Festus Kayamo, you see that when he came, before he came, there were already strategies by the ministry. So he just prioritized them and started running with them. It's too early to give an overall assessment, but at least we are beginning to see some, you know, processes. But I want to reiterate that piecemeal approach will not be helpful. There is the need for an overarching strategy, and there is the need for a process of filtering policy ideas. I remember over 20 years ago, as country director of Action Aid, because our area of work was poverty eradication, there was a presidential think tank called Independent Policy Group. There's no time they take any decision on poverty without I being at the table, not as a government person, but as an expert in terms of poverty eradication. We need to go back to that so that, you know, the policies will be aligned, so that there will be real performance monitoring. In fact, there's a way today which you do it. The president himself in his office will point a button and will be seeing the results and the targets and how far it is done. So I think a lot of work still needs to be done, but I think they are taking the right direction.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's quickly, yes. Okay, you want to add? Okay.
Yeah, most of what Doctor has mentioned have actually been considered, and I think that's the beauty. Because it's a public forum, there is a limit to what one can say. But I know during the process of the retreat, issues around, you know, challenges around even setting baselines, which has been one of the major challenges in the process. I mean, you can run 100 meters in 10 seconds, and then you put 1 hour as your baseline for running 100 meters. The whole process is faulty at the beginning. So what the CDCU did is to ensure it has brought in experts within the process who can look at claims or baselines that because the ministers are just, they are political heads. Like I said, the PAMSECs are there. They are the technocrats who drive the process. And I mean, let's not kid ourselves. The issue of capacity came up within the civil service. But I was delighted to hear the ministers. None of the ministers who spoke did not mention the desire to improve the capacity of the civil service. So that has been recognized. And I think for me, especially where I'm coming from, recognizing a challenge and then putting in place measures to address that challenge is actually the beginning point. So if that is done, improving the capacity of the civil service to deliver on this performance is the baseline that is correct, has been set, then I think the rest is just to watch how the ministers, and the president has said it, if you don't perform, he's kicking you out. So I just want to emphasize the point that virtually everything you've mentioned was taken into consideration. Both ICPC and EFCC were given the platform to actually discuss their agenda over the next 4 years. They delivered papers at the beginning of the session. So it was, I would say, a process that recognized the role and contributions of each of the players within the sector. And at the end of the day, I think the 3 C's that were emphasized, coordination, collaboration, and cooperation, was brought to the fore. And I think one of the things that I'm hoping to see going forward is how those 3 C's will be achieved within the government. As an example, the Minister of Youth and Women Affairs severally stood up and, during panel conversations to say these priorities that you want to achieve, if you don't work with women, you can't achieve it. If you don't work with youth, you can't achieve it. So there and then, it was agreed among certain ministries that collaborative sessions will be held among them. And that's the kind of spirit that we saw during the retreat. So I'm actually optimistic, extremely optimistic, but I agree that, like they say, in fact, the theme of the retreat is delivering on the renewed hope agenda. Very apt.
Very apt, yes.
So we're looking ahead to see how it will be delivered.
Yeah, I think I agree with you completely that the team is apt because since return to civil rule, hopes of Nigeria have been dashed. When Obasanjo came in 1999, there were a lot of high expectations, but the 8 years of high economic growth did not translate to improvement or reduction of poverty or improvement of the life of citizens. And then when Jonathan came, he had no shoes. The first graduate and PhD holder as president, there was a renewed, expectation.
Yes.
But in 8 years of 5 years of the regime, the thing was dashed because of the way many people were displaying open corruption.
Exactly.
And then Buhari came in 2015 with the change agenda. But his lackadaisical attitude to governance made the hope. So renewed hope was something that resonates with people and Nigerians. And people are looking forward. It is good that to hear that some of the issues I raised have been addressed. That is the reason why the need for strategic communication is key, because government cannot be done in isolation.
And it was actually discussed, strategic communication. The Minister of Information, and I think, by the way, even providing this forum,
exactly,
which is an arm of the Ministry of Information, is a way of telling Nigerians that this is happening. The Minister of Information spoke extensively around strategic communication. Now, my worry, and again, with all sense of responsibility, is these conversations are had, but sometimes we rarely see them being implemented. The NOA is there. It's been comatose for a few years now. We're hoping that we'll see a change in that. Part of the issues included in the Renewed Hope agenda is the holding of town hall meetings. So I think they didn't call it town hall, they called it something else. But embedded in that document is the desire to win the hearts and minds of Nigerians.
Okay.
So you cannot win the hearts and minds of Nigerians if you do not have a strategic system in place to do that. So we're hoping that going forward.
Yeah, I've always said that when you get something on a platter of gold, like you mentioned, the Obasanjo just came out of prison, he was given the presidency. Jonathan, presidency. Buhari, president. This time around, it was a hard-fought victory for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu against all odds. He became the president. Now, let's bring in the Minister of Health, Dr. Tunji Alausa. You've been listening to the conversation here in the studio, and I feel you're getting a feel of how everybody feels. Like one of the 8 priority agenda of the president and something of concern in this country is the health sector, of which you're part of right now. And there's no way you can have a productive nation without a functioning health sector. This sector has been bedeviled by so many issues, the Japa syndrome, the tourism, health tourism. Nigerians prefer to go outside to get treatment. What was on the table at the retreat for the health sector, and how it can be rejigged and rejuvenated to become one of the best in the world, which used to be, because around the world, some the best doctors in the world are Nigerians.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Juma. Let me first clarify what Dr. Iguzo said about the KPIs. The KPIs, the key performance indicators, were not just put together by ministers. They were evidence-based driven. Like everybody knows, the president has 8 priorities area, which I've listed earlier on. And these 8 priorities areas led to 8 areas of focus, which included, I'll tell you, in health sector, focus on education, health, and social investment as essential pillars of development. The other area, unlock energy and natural resources for sustainable development. All the KPIs all are to align with the 8 priorities of President Bola, Ahmed, Tinubu, and also the 8 areas of focus. Now, with healthcare sector, there's a degree of, we have a percentage of immunization coverage in the country. We started about 66% now, but then do we want to be in 1 year, in 2 years, in 3 years, in 4 years? So they were carefully thought out indicators, which are all evidence-based. So these, and if you look at the KPIs, and I know somebody said, one of our speakers, I think it might be Kabir that said, or Dr. Iguzo that said, the public has to know, the public need to know what the KPIs are. I'm sure the president in his message would decide what he needs to do. But this is an open and transparent government. And also about citizen engagement. It was robustly discussed. The citizen will have to be part of the people that will grade the ministers. So let's be clear about that. These are not indicators, grading system that will be shrouded in secrecy. There's robust citizen engagement and participation that has been built into this evaluation process. And I'll repeat again, the KPIs are evidence-based driven indicators. It's not just the Minister of Housing or Minister of Health just deciding, oh, this is what I want to put. They all align with the 8 priorities area of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and the 8 areas of focus that he has charted out for our country. Now, Juma, let me now go to answer your question in a more specific manner. Like you said, and everybody knows, without a healthy nation, you can never have a productive nation. Now, when Honorable Mr. Patti and I got to the ministry after our appointment by the president, we did a lot of things. We did deep diagnostic into where are we as a country in the health sector. Then after that, after the full diagnostics that we did, we had a retreat with all senior officials, the director, the permanent secretary, the directors, that these are the problems. Where do we want to go? What are the solutions that would have to get us to our destination? We came up with 4 pillars of what we will be doing as a ministry in the next 4 years. The first was we had to improve governance in our healthcare system. We had to hold ourselves accountable, the physician accountable, health facilities accountable. The citizens are the central focus of what we do. So accountability in every sector of our healthcare system was one major area where we started working on. The second thing was that we need to improve our population outcomes by strengthening our healthcare system. I'm a physician. I know how an average and individual doctor think, what they want. I'll tell you a lot about physicians leaving the country today. It's not because of low pay. That's just about 20% contributor to the reason of why they're living. A major part of where they live with the Japa syndrome is they don't feel they don't have enough infrastructure to support what they went to medical school, what they got trained at, and to deliver best care to our citizens. That's one major reason why doctors are leaving the country. Now, we will strengthen the President Bola Ahmed, I know Bola Ahmed Tinubu has directed. Everybody knows healthcare is a huge focus of this administration. It's done it before in Lagos State, and I don't see any problem today. It's just expanding what he did in Lagos State to the entire country of Nigeria. We will strengthen our healthcare system by improving our infrastructure. We have started to rejig and rejuvenate our research and innovation system. We created a National Research Committee to get our research ecosystem to what it's at par with what exists and what is available internationally. The committee members have been carefully chosen, people that have excelled in their various walks of life. That committee will be launched. Nigeria will become a global destination of clinical research. We'll be able to attract multi-millions of dollars into our research space, get our professors to unleash the capabilities in them. Then we're also working on improving infrastructures at the hospital. I've toured some of the hospitals, some of our federal hospitals. I'll tell you today, and I'm very convinced, our federal tertiary hospitals have been the ones that have rescued our healthcare system. They're providing amazing services at those hospitals at fraction, heavily subsidized care. In some parts of our country, patients are paying 100 naira a night to stay in a hospital. You don't get that in anywhere in the world. Now, we will strengthen these hospitals. We're also working aggressively with our subnational government, the governors, having to tell them how we have to improve immunization rates, improve zero-dose immunization, improve under 5 mortality rate, improve infant mortality rate, improve stunting growth in our children. That we're working so hard, and we see a lot of willing, diligent partners in moving this agenda forward. That's the second thing we're doing in our healthcare system. And as part of unlocking our value chain, you would have heard some of our pronouncement. We're working on digitalizing our healthcare system, healthcare digitalization. We'll start with the federal tertiary hospitals and the primary healthcare center, where there will be continuum of care, flow of information, and then as we finish building this robust electronic medical record system, we'll get the state to latch in, the subnational government to latch in. So we'll now have a situation where we have a robust data collection system and data that we can actually validate that can guide us to improvements that we're making as a country in the healthcare sector. This won't just be percentages coming out of the air. This will be data-driven matrix, and that's the way we've designed a process in revamping and revitalizing the healthcare of our nation, where we can begin to provide comprehensive and meaningful healthcare to each citizen of Nigeria. The third part of what we're doing as part of our pillar is unlocking the value chain in our healthcare sector. We have underutilized our healthcare sectors as modality of change, where we can get our young people, young teeming population employed. Look at it today, the healthcare sector as a contributor of GDP to Nigeria is just below 4%. Go to any other advanced democracy. I'll use America, United States, for example. We have healthcare sector contribute about 24.5% of their GDP. That translates into about $3.3 trillion in annual spend every year. Today, Nigeria healthcare contributes about 4% of our GDP. If we're able to move this percentage 5% each year, we will be able to create hundreds of thousands of jobs, good paying jobs. Luckily, healthcare sector is a big utilizer of manpower. You cannot put robots, you need human touch. You need nurses, you need medical laboratory scientists, you need pharmacists, you need dietitians to work. And as we continue to improve, build on what we have, we can now create a big economy. Healthcare, to the extent that healthcare will be a bigger contributor than communication, or oil and gas that we've all focused on as a nation. If we want to get our youth engaged, give them a paying job, revamping and unlocking the value chain in the healthcare sector is one way to go, and we're doing that. The fourth pillar of what we're doing is that we need to now look at health beyond physical security. We have to look at health as social security and national security. Now, in terms of social security, if you look at the President, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, always very deliberate and very calculative in what he does. He has carefully hidden social welfare to part of the ministry. We now have a Minister of Health and Social Welfare. We're working on, we have a proposal now on Social Action Fund, where we would begin to impact at the community level, engage them, what they want to do, give direct support to them in terms of how they want to build their clinics, their local dispensary and things like that, build borehole, where beyond the core of poverty alleviation, where money is being given to individual Nigerians, money will be given to community at the world level for them based on the projects they've decided to do. Beyond this, there'll be accountability. We can now begin to reshape the economy at the world level where people would, and as you do that, you stimulate the economy at the local level by the time giving empowerment to people at the community, deciding what they want to do. Do they want to build their primary care center? Do they want to fix their school? Do they want to build borehole? Do they want to do some agricultural input? And that once we get to that point, people will be so empowered at the world level, at the community level, and they'll feel the benefit of participatory democracy. They'll feel the benefit of government that actually care, listen, and deliver to them.
Dr. Alausa, very detailed, but of course there are questions, about some of the things that you have said, but we'll take that. All right, welcome back. It's still Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the NTA, and our conversation is still on the retreat for ministers and presidential aides, which went down last week. Before we went on that break, we heard the Minister of Health talk about some of the plans they have come up with on how they intend to improve that sector. There are questions, and I'd like Dr. Buzo to please respond, but this time not just to the health sector. Yes, we've said, maybe the ministers may be up to it, but definitely there will be challenges. You mentioned previous administrations. When they came aboard, there were plans. But unfortunately, time elapsed and nothing to show for it. So could you, just tell us, what do you think are the likely brick walls those ministers will meet and how they can surmount it?
Thank you very much. I think it's interesting and it's heartwarming listening to the Minister of State for Health show the agenda for the health sector. As a pharmacist myself, I'm really happy about the plans that they've made. But like you mentioned, the problems of this country, the diagnostics, it's known to everyone. In fact, our lived experiences has transformed the average Nigerian to expert on problems or challenges of development of the country. The challenge, and also, even apart from that, the solution to the problems are known. Take any sector. The security sector. What do you need to do? Is it intelligence, equipment, personnel and training, good policy, involvement of citizens? What needs to be done? If you go to agriculture, is it post-harvest losses? Is it yield? The kind of seeds and inputs? Is it the land? Is it agricultural chain? Go to education. Is it the content of education? Is it the relevance? Is it access? Is it equipment? Environment of learning? Curriculum? Pedagogy? So every sector. Is it housing? You know? Not the kind of the predominant policy you have today. Housing policy of public-private partnership in Abuja. That translates to what? You go to minister if you are a developer. The minister gives you land. You go and demarcate the land into plots and sell one plot for 10 million. How will the poor have access to house? So, it's gratifying to see these plans. But the challenge is how to translate the plans into reality. That's why the mayor of New York City, Akume, said campaign is done in poetry and governance is done in prose. And I think that is why this retreat is important. Because the retreat is how to translate the campaign promises into reality. So, what are the likely challenges that the government needs to, because nowadays it's not just criticism, we want solution. What are the likely challenges that the government needs to tackle in order to ensure that the beautiful plans of the health sector and indeed all the other sectors come to reality? I've talked about some of them. First, overarching strategy. Second, policy, system of policy. Third, citizen participation, citizen involvement. For strategic communication, not just the entire government, but even the sector. So the ministry needs to carry the stakeholders in that sector along and have strategic communication. But more importantly, is the issue of revenue. This government, our government, has revenue problem. I don't know whether it was discussed at the retreat, but the revenue is in the country. Nigeria is one of the countries in the world where you have the lowest paying tax. There are countries that don't have oil. Governance is run through the tax system. The revenue generating agencies collect the money and pocket it. All their names and the officers in charge are there in the Auditor General's report. Nothing is done about it. The NTA report has documented the agencies that are owing Nigeria government trillions of naira.
Big
money. The money is there. So there is going to, for the health sector to implement, there is going to be, to give equipment to all the hospitals, there's going to be a revenue problem. So it depends on how this government is able to deal with those revenue problems. And where the revenue is known. So dealing with the revenue problem is key. Now there's NTA report that has given all of this, and the Auditor General's report. So all the revenue. There are also some other sectors that are potential revenue generators. Although the government has recognized it, but we want to see the reality. The blue economy, the maritime economy, huge.
The entertainment
Yes. Sector, huge resources. Mineral sector, huge resources. So the resources that are required to accelerate the development of the country are here in the country. So what needs to be done is translating that promises and plans into reality. Now, what is normally done in every country, if you want to make this transition, is first to have a vision. You know, there's this emphasis of 8-point agenda, but they have to capture it in a vision that can resonate with citizens. And then the vision is put in a strategy. And then each of these sectors, like the health sector, what he has said now, they have to put it in a strategy, which is the health sector strategy. And then the annual plans and budget will have to be drawn from that. And then the machinery of government, the bureaucracy, to drive that. And I think Kabiru talked about capacity. Yes. We have been talking about public services reform for the past 35 years. But there are still challenges. It's an ongoing challenge. So, but, you know, Kabiru, it goes beyond capacity. Mindset, attitude to work, corruption. How do you make the procurement system transparent and fair price? You know, many years ago, there have been studies that have shown that contract sums in Nigeria are higher than every other country. In fact, recently, one state government, you know, commissioned a 10-kilometer road, which was tarred with 30 billion naira. 30 billion.
A 10-kilometer
10 kilometer is wide though. But it's 30 billion. Ekiti state government budget in 2023 is 113 billion. So if you use 30 billion in the state to tar 10-kilometer road. So these are the things that will affect the implementation.
Exactly.
Yes, because implementation is key.
If some government procurement prices are made known, there will be outrage.
Besides prices, there's also no monitoring of the kind of infrastructure that is put in place. You realize when you go to public, sectors and a public office and then a private office, you could find a pen, but the one in the public office is something that will probably just function for a week and stop to function, or not effectively. So, and then you go somewhere else, you get a pen that would function for a long time without giving you issues. So there's also the issue of quality in the public service.
Absolutely.
Besides price.
Absolutely. So that is why, you know, beyond the plans, there are many soft things, soft issues that the government needs to address. And like I said, in all of these things, the solutions are known.
They are known.
The Bureau of Public Procurement has developed an app called Nokopo, which requires that every procurement and the steps will be put there. But you know what? They are not using it.
That's, you know, corruption, fighting corruption. Now, you talked about translating plans into reality, and one part of the speech of the president at the retreat, he said, and I quote, "The bigger picture is not about winning political battles or securing short-term victories. It is about renewing the hope of our people by providing equality of opportunity, social justice, and prosperity for all through the strategic deliverables we have all signed on today. It's about leaving a legacy of a united, just, and thriving nation." Kabiru Adwan, I'm bringing you into this. There's no way a nation can thrive without security.
Exactly. But before then, let me just comment on a few things that Dr. Otive has mentioned. First, starting with the head of service, there is a reform agenda. I think two of them, I can't really recall them immediately. The head of service was part of the entire process, the retreat. Of course, the PAMSECs, quote unquote, under her, and she provided that strategic leadership for their participation. And of course, she spoke on a few occasions during the retreat and spoke about the reform agenda within the civil service. In fact, the team within the CDCU, Central Delivery Coordination Unit, is coming from her. She's also talked about, the capacity building that she has introduced within the system. And one of the things that we've all recognized, and I don't know about you, if you've interacted with the civil service, especially the core of permanent secretaries that we have at the moment, they are effective, competent persons, unlike what we used to have in the past. You give them...
Stay tight. then they never want to leave.
And another thing that came to the fore during the retreat is the system is now essentially, even though there are still areas to be corrected, competence-based. Merit, to a larger extent, determines your promotion to the next level. Unlike what it used to do in the past. Is it yet to huru? No. There are still areas that we need to correct, but progress has been made. I think we need to recognize that. The other thing is the issue around procurement. It was delved into extensively during the retreat. Discussions were held. These challenges were brought to the fore. The various means through which the system circumvents the procurement process was also discussed. And I agree with you totally. Most of these challenges are known. It's not that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We know the clogs in the wheels of our progress. We know what to do to fix it. And I'm very delighted that they were all discussed. So we're quite optimistic. Now, with regards to your question regarding the security sector, I can sit here and tell you that everything is okay, but I will be doing justice to myself personally, and then of course to the listeners. Security, just like Dr. Otivi hinted during his contributions, we know what the challenges are within the security sector. And I always say that I was privileged to moderate the panel on security. The various components that were supposed to participate in that panel discussion. And sadly, this is what worries me. There is a presidential directive to achieve the 3 C's of security: coordination, collaboration, and cooperation. Unfortunately, even within the retreat, I saw challenges that could affect this presidential aspiration. As an example, the intelligence community, with all sense of responsibility, was absent in the retreat. Perhaps there was an excuse, presidential approval for that absence. I don't know, but it wasn't discussed. And I'm worried if we approach security in the manner that we've approached it before. I make bold to say that perhaps in the Fourth Republic, there hasn't been any government that has invested in security like the Buhari administration. But during that administration, the number of Nigerians that died, I don't think there's any other administration within the period that the number of Nigerians have died in that. What am I trying to say? Money is not the problem of the security sector. So, and I'm hoping that this administration is cognizant of that. Don't fall into the trap of just spending money. We've just approved a supplementary budget. Security has the largest share of that supplementary budget. So if we make the mistake of repeating what the Buhari administration did by just dumping money into security, it's tantamount to using a basket to fetch water. The 3 C's have to be achieved. And in doing that, and I'm happy it was discussed during the retreat, the local government system, it has to be reactivated. The best way to it must work. If you are going to win the hearts and minds of the people, citizen participation that Dr. Otibe mentioned, there is no other way of achieving it better than to activate that local government system. And it was discussed at the retreat, how to achieve it. And that is why the participation of the parliament is absolutely important. These things require a constitutional review. It's not something that the executive on its own can achieve. The governors, and of course you asked the question regarding the subnationals. The subnationals are probably the most influential group, especially the governors in the country at the moment. The president himself came from that group. Name them. Almost everybody in the administration came from that group. So we need to bring them on board to make sure that they recognize that, look, we cannot have a better country if we do not improve that particular area, local government administration. I know you asked me on security,
yes,
and I didn't want to go the way of just saying do this, do that. This is what we need to do. We need to reactivate the local government system, make sure the person in the village, in my town, in Dogondaji, where today if I go, if I say all the public security departments in Dogondaji, there probably will be not more than 10 of them. And when bandits are coming, you see probably 100 of them on motorcycles coming to attack that town. How is that sustainable? It's not sustainable. So we need to reactivate that local government system. We need to strengthen the subnational system at the state level, where all of these things that we're discussing performance delivery systems at the federal level.
Yeah.
What about at the state level?
State
At the
level.
local
All right.
government level.
Okay. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Adamo. We're sure that the government, those who should listen are listening, and of course, we'll do the needful so we can get things right this time around. But running out of time on the program, but I just quickly want to go to Dr. Alausa. You heard Dr. Adamo talk about security and all of that, but before then he talked about permanent secretaries being equal to the task and ready. I just want to know, during the retreat, was there anything about training and retraining for civil servants? Because we know the permanent secretaries will not be the ones, to do the real work. Yes, the minister, the permanent secretary, but I mean, the civil servants, is there anything about training and retraining for them just so that it can be carried along this hope agenda? And then there's this news flying around that is going to be a minor reshuffle. Is that true too? Just quickly, Honorable Minister, so we can round off.
Two questions. With regard, let me take the reshuffle. I don't. That's the prerogative of the president, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, to decide who he wants to, how he wants to constitute his cabinet. He's constituted his cabinet is his prerogative. Is the president and commander in chief. So I don't have any more to say on that. Now let's talk about the getting the permanent secretary involved. This is, if you look at the performance bond that was signed by everybody, by the ministers, each permanent secretary also signed that performance bond. This is this is a pivotal time in the history of our country. And the president made it very clear. The ministers cannot do it alone. Then the permanent secretary should not look at it. Oh, the ministers will come, the political leader will come in 4 years, 8 years, and they're gone, and they'll be there. No, this is a collaboration. This is a collective agenda that we all have to be involved. So the president was very clear during the retreat, the importance of the need for the permanent secretary to be fully on board. And with regards to training, if the head of service, Dr. Folasade Yemi-Esan, they've put a lot of processes in place to improve on the capacity of the permanent secretary and the entire civil service architecture, the entire civil service structure. They've rolled out this performance monitoring system there, which is all digitalized, and they're working each through the various ministries. And Ike Mokode has also been very pivotal in supporting the government's foundation in helping the civil service build capacity. He also presented as one of the panelists during the retreat, and he's spending his money to support our public service. So
thank you so much, Dr. Alausa, because of time. But I think you've hit the nail on the head there, that we're going to strengthen the civil service. So, of course, we're looking forward to all of that. Yes, and like Adamu said, Dr. Adamu said, these are things that we can actually see and feel and touch. Yeah, so it's not just about ear marking this time around. We can now eye mark and touch mark and all of that. All right, so thank you so much. Dr. Tunji Alausa, the Minister of State Health and Social Welfare, for joining us on the program this morning. We appreciate you for, really coming very early. Yes, we realized that you had to cut short your sleep. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. And we also hope that you wake up the health sector too. All right, so we also want to... All right, so I also want to thank Dr. TVA Iguzo. Many thanks, the Founding Executive Director, African Center for Leadership, Strategy and Development. Thank you for joining us on the program. And Dr. Kabiru Adamu, Security and Risk Management Expert. A pleasure to have you join us again.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you.
All right, so let's have a bit of foreign news now.
Israel's military says it has encircled Gaza City and divided besieged coastal strip into two, as Gaza came under its third total communication outage since the start of the war. This, the Israeli army spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, says is a significant stage in Israel's war against Hamas. Israeli media reported that troops are expected to enter Gaza City within 48 hours, as strong explosions were seen in northern Gaza after nightfall. but the collapse of connectivity across Gaza, confirmed by the Palestinian telecom company Paltel, made it even more complicated to convey details of the new stage of the military offensive. Israel said it would press on with its offensive against Hamas despite U.S. appeals for even brief pauses to get aid to desperate civilians. The Palestinian Health Ministry said more than 9,700 Palestinians have been killed in the territory in nearly a month of war. More than 4,000 of them are children. That toll is said to likely rise as Israeli troops advance into dense urban neighborhoods.
All right, that's a Good Morning Nigeria for today. Many thanks for joining us. See you bright and early tomorrow. I'm Ian Ray John.
And I am Jumai. Yes, do have a great day.